I'm Shay Russell for mining.com.au, and joining me today is the Managing Director for Minbos Resources, Lindsay Reed. Lindsay, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on today.
Pleasure to be on.
Now, I have been chasing you for an interview because I believe we've got lots of very good things to talk about. And essentially, I've been wanting to bring the Minbos story to more people in Australia because, unlike conventional mining companies, you are in a product called phosphate. Before we even get to some of the exciting things the company's doing out in Angola, what even is phosphate for everyone who's new to it?
Well, it's one of the three nutrients that plants need. You know, they need nitrogen, they need phosphate, and they need potassium. And in the country that we're in, it absolutely needs phosphate because the soil is really, really deficient in phosphate. But every living thing needs phosphate. Every single cell has phosphate. So without phosphate, no life.
Tell me, what took you out to Angola? Because correct me if I'm wrong, this could be my pretty lousy geography coming out. Angola is on the west coast of Africa. So what made you go looking for a phosphate project out there?
I didn't look; it found me. I had a background in industrial minerals and in Africa, and some headhunters came and got me. I interviewed the board. I told them I wasn't going to take the job until I went and looked at it, met all the local partners, which they didn't have any money at the time, so I actually paid for my own ticket to go over there, and met the team, met the local partner, and thought, yeah, no, that's a really good project. We can make something out of that.
I believe it was 10 years last month since you first visited Cabinda in Angola, where the project is located. What did the project look like way back then? As you said, the board had no money and you had to pay for your own ticket. Describe what it looked like right back then.
Well, it was 10 years, while I was over there on my last trip, it was 10 years since I actually went on that self-paid trip to Cabinda. It didn't look like much. There wasn't much happening there. It's always been an oil and gas province. They'd done the drilling on the project. They tried a number of different feasibility studies and models, and it hadn't really progressed a lot when I got there.
So how did you decide that it was a good project then, if it was sort of stuck in such a
Just
hill?
just the grade and the location. So the deposit's located like 500 metres off a dual lane sealed road, and then it's only like I think 45 kilometres down to a port, and then the deposit comes to within a metre of the surface, and it's 10 metres thick, and it's 30% P2O5 in the ground. I mean, this just doesn't happen. So it's really high grade. And then what we found out later on was the phosphate rock is actually quite reactive, which means you can use it as a direct application fertilizer, which was unexpected. I didn't know that at the time when I joined.
So 10 years ago, you were branching out into phosphate, and I would say that the mineral had even less publicity back then. And now you've managed to grow the resource to where it is now. How have you made this happen? I mean, is this, an overnight success story 10 years in the making?
No, 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 it wasn't. We were a minority partner to start off with, and the other partner, joint venture partner, they're really good guys, and I learned a lot from them. But they fell out. They fell out of love with each other, and so the project wasn't progressing, and the government eventually took it off us, and so the government then put it back out to tender, and Minbos tendered for it in its own right. And in the meantime, our local partner had passed away as the license was being cancelled as well. So it was all a little bit complicated, but that was sort of where the first 5 or 6 years went. And then we sort of had to start again. But, by then we'd worked out that the phosphate could be used as a local product, and it has a lot more value and a lot more social value as a local product than it did as an export project, which is what we'd looked at always before.
So you describe, obviously it's gone really nowhere in the first 5 years of you being involved with it. So really the main growth in the project has come in the last 5 years since then.
I think it's 3 years since we were awarded the mining license. So, we tendered, and then, I think it was 3 years since we've had the mining license and we're actually been able to progress. So, yeah, everything's really happened in the last 3 years.
Now, I believe that you were told that you won the tender on the day the WHO announced the
Yeah,
pandemic. How
yeah.
how do you even manage to grow a project like this when there is a global pandemic and Australia essentially shut shop to the rest of the world?
Well, that's exactly what happened, and I was in Perth, and Perth shut shop to the rest of Australia. So it was really, it was really crazy over here. Yeah, no, we were told that we won the license. I think exactly the same day or the day after the World Health Organization announced that there was a pandemic, and so it was over a year before anybody from Australia could actually get to Angola after we'd won this project. But on the flip side, I'd met up with the son of our local partner and met him and said, "Do you want a tender?" And he said, "Yes." He was a really really good guy, and he'd moved his family down to Cape Town. His wife had gone down to have a baby and be close to family down there, and he just said, "Look, I'm just popping back up to Angola for a week." And I'll be back at the end of the week. And then he got stuck there for a year. He didn't see that baby till it was 11 months old. And so while I couldn't get into Angola, he couldn't get out.
Oh,
And so we were able to look after all of the technical studies here with the engineers, and he was able to look after all of the administrative work and getting the license and pushing that through. But it was very tough. Yeah, and that was really tough for that first year.
how do you manage a project remotely? Like you would have to have excellent faith in your technical team on the ground there.
We were lucky because the one of the guys that had been involved in previous studies with the previous manager, he was based in Perth and he worked for DRA. And DRA had an office in Perth and had an office in Africa. And because he'd visited the project, there was a lot of things that we were able to do that required a visit to the project, and he'd already been there. So that really helped and meant that our technical guys here could interface with him and his team. And similarly with our geologist, the resource geologist who'd done the drilling, she was still our resource geologist, and SRK was happy to take her on and sign off on things. So we were able to sign off on things without people having to go to Angola, which was just really lucky. But not easy. Yeah, not easy.
So it took over a year before, once you've been awarded the license, to be able to get your Australian team on the ground.
Well,
What were your first
just me.
impressions?
Just me. We made the decision that I would go and we would leave the Australian team here because it was so difficult to get in and out. It would take you 2 weeks to get over there, plus some quarantine, then a couple of weeks. And you'd have to book 6 weeks in advance to get a flight home, and then it'd be 2 weeks quarantine here. So if you went for there for 2 months, you'd be stuck in hotels for almost 2 months waiting. So it took me 3 weeks in Dubai to get a visa on my way there. I left Perth, jumped on a plane. There was like 12 people on the plane. Got to Dubai airport. You could have shot a gun down there, and you wouldn't have hit anybody. There was just nobody there. Then I had to wait 3 weeks, get a visa, and got down to Angola, did 10 days quarantine there, and then decided there just wasn't any point coming home. Told my wife I was going to stay, and rented a house and left everybody in Perth. And I just tried to do, I've got a technical background, commercial background, so I just tried to do everything that my team needed to do. And we just left them there in Perth, and I was stranded in Angola for I think 13 months out of 14. I got home briefly to Perth and had to have a knee surgery when I got here.
Oh,
Yeah, it was a really interesting time. Yeah.
well, I feel like we've tried to summarize 13 difficult months into about 60 seconds there. I'm going to take a step back for a second. You spent 3 weeks in Dubai waiting on a visa to get into Angola. So you couldn't
Yes.
get one while you were in Australia. Did you have to get
No.
out
So
of the country first?
Angola doesn't have a consular representative in Australia, and Australians are told to go to Singapore or South Africa. But both of those countries were completely out of, you weren't allowed to travel to them at all. So I couldn't get into them. So I had to go to Dubai and try and get there. And one of the things that held us up for the first 2 weeks, they held on to the passport. Eventually, the message came back after 2 weeks saying, "Why is this man from Austria trying to get a passport, have a visa in Dubai? He's supposed to be going via Europe." And you think, no, there's a kangaroo and an emu on the front. He's actually from Australia. so there was 2 weeks just wasted. Well, they thought I was from Austria, but I didn't find that out. And then we eventually set them straight. And I had letters from the mines minister. He was really, really helpful and pushing hard to try and get me down there. He's a great guy.
This is incredible. So you get to Angola and you're like, you know what? I need to be here to grow the project. You rent a house nearby. Where do you start in the middle of a pandemic when global supply chains are shut?
Well, pretty much the first thing we did was I went and met the minister, told him what we'd been doing, and then the next day ordered the plan, and which was a little bit crazy because we didn't quite know what we needed, but we knew that we needed to get that done with the way the pandemic was going, and the price of everything was going through the roof, and steel price was going up, almost 20% a month. It was just crazy. So we ordered that plant, but we knew it had the flexibility to adapt to three different purposes, in fact, and in the end, we did actually adapt it to a different purpose than what we ordered it to. But that put us in good stead because we were progressing. The plant was from the US, and I did actually get to travel to the US. It was being built in Green Bay. I couldn't get home to Australia, but I could go to a lot of other places. I got to Portugal. I got all over Angola. Got up to the US, Florida, Alabama, Green Bay, where our plant was being built. I even went to a Green Bay Packers game. So everybody at home's looking at my Facebook page and saying, "Aren't you having a COVID?" So it was pretty crazy. Yeah.
Now, just to step back for everybody who isn't familiar with some of the terms that you're using, you talk about how you just ordered the plant. That was the first thing, or one of the very first things that you did when you get there. What type
Yeah.
of
So
plant are you actually talking about?
it was $8 million worth of equipment. Just that's the major equipment, which it's all in Cabinda now. It was a granulation plant, so it enabled us to granulate the phosphate rock with some other ingredients, dry it, cool it, size it. Anything that was too small or too big went back around again, started again, and anything that was the right size went out to product. So that was the plan. But we always knew that we could sort of ditch some of that equipment and just make it a crushing and a drying plant, which is what we've done. Or if we really want to, we can turn it into an acidulation plant, make single superphosphate or triple superphosphate, something, or partially acidulated phosphate rock. So it had a lot of flexibility. So it wasn't a big risk decision to make it. And that $8 million, by the way, the insurers came through the other day and wanted to insure it for 21 million. So that's how much life has changed in 2 years. So it was a good thing to do.
Thanks again for being here today, Lindsay. I hope we speak again soon.